So I had a very interesting journey, as you know, but maybe some others of your listeners don't know. I was an oceanographer. So I went like this, to writing instead of like this. Yeah, so I loved books and I loved writing, but as a woman in India, I just really felt it was very important that I needed to be financially stable. And to do that,
Mm.
I felt like I needed a job. And for some reason, I thought that science would give me a steady job. And it's kind of true because writing goes up and down and up and down. It's so unpredictable.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I've heard you were talking about in one interview how some people see them as being such different careers, but you actually saw science and math as going together with writing really well. That it was, I'm trying to remember how you phrased it, that it was like just like another language or another way of expressing.
Yeah, for me, I feel like the words on a page are a little bit like music, right? And everybody makes the connection between mathematics and music, and they're like, "Oh, those are so much alike." Well, words and patterns of sounds, on the page are what writing is about in some ways.
And so
Um,
what made you make the leap then from, so you had this career as an oceanographer, and then why the switch to author? What made you make that leap?
I loved to write, but there was something that also, beyond just the love of it. As when I was an oceanographer, I felt like it was like beating my head against a wall at one point because so much of what's happening to the world today with global climate change,
Mm.
and warming and all of that, we knew it was going to happen. So we were talking about that already, and I felt like people would just close their eyes and look away and not want to listen, not want to interact with things if they were coming from a place that was not so compassionate sometimes,
Mm.
or fear. And I really feel that our books, especially books, I think, that take a deep dive into emotion, I think books like that can really help open up, people's minds and hearts so that it is not, this place of fear that people are coming from, but rather a place of compassion.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. And we had kind of talked, when we were chatting beforehand, that I know you've talked about how books can really help people create compassion and empathy because it's like you're inhabiting somebody else's soul and you see the world through their eyes. And I was wondering, because you do write so many stories about marginalized characters, for those that don't know, the most recent book, Born Behind Bars, is literally about a boy who is born in prison. His mother is in prison when he's born, and who there without a trial, I should say. And because you're writing about these marginalized characters, do you find that that is more important to kind of to evoke that empathy and that compassion and your readers?
I think so, because I think especially, unfortunately at this point in time, we're seeing a lot of, people reacting and saying that books written by people who are from underrepresented and marginalized communities should be, shoved under the carpet and not looked at, right? And it just, I don't understand that. It's so upsetting to me because if you do not look at the reality of what is today, you can never make a better tomorrow, right? If you do not look at the reality of the past, you will not make a better tomorrow. And so I
Yes.
think it's just very important to acknowledge the truth of where we are. And I think, obviously, not just me, right? So many of my amazing colleagues as well write books that are just very important for us to read, especially today, but always.
Right.
Until we hopefully one day we'll get to this place where there won't be any more marginalized or underrepresented voices, right? But that we are far, far away from. And so we need to hear the voices that we have not honored. We need to hear the voices that have been disrespected or trampled upon or suppressed in the past, particularly.
Yes. Yes. And books they're such a wonderful way to do that. Um, you have lived in 5 countries.
Yeah.
I know. And you've said that you've seen hate and prejudice in each of the countries, but also love and friendship. And one of the things that's really amazing about your books that a lot of people have remarked on is that even though the characters face these incredible difficulties, like being without a home, you know, parents in difficult circumstances, or maybe not having their parents, still they manage to find joy, which is so beautiful because I was talking with one of the authors about this. Sometimes it's kind of hard when you are teaching children about all the difficulties of the world to also teach them about the joy that there is to make sure that they have both elements to that. So why was that important to you when you were writing these stories?
So I said earlier, right, and I always say this, that books are kind of like this this place where you can, really see somebody else's soul, for me. It's like this soul merging or soul melting experience. And I think that for me, my soul, the way that it operates or has always operated is to see the joy in even the very difficult moments. So I had a childhood that was, fairly unusual. Especially I think in the South Asian community, there are lots of things that happen to me that I don't think have happened to most other people that I have met who are authors. And so I think during those very difficult times in my life, the way that I got through those was really to look at or to hold on to moments of joy,
Mm-hmm.
because luckily for me, I had a life in which there was some love, there was some joy, and for me to hold on to that was just so important. And to be able to laugh. And I was bullied a lot. I mean, I think I mentioned this before, that I came from a home in which my parents had split up, and
Mm-hmm.
that was very rare. So when I was going through school and college, no one else that I knew with South Asian parents, well, I mean, obviously I was not with South Asian parents, I was in India, right? So I was growing up in India, and no one else that I knew in college or in school had two parents that were living and separate. And that was just part of it. There was much more than that going on, but even just that part led to a whole lot of bullying,
Mm-hmm.
because even from the adults, because they did not know what was going on. And it
Right.
was easy to bully a child, but not bully my very strong mother. So I think when I sensed that there could be laughter that was really cruel, but there was this other kind of laughter,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the laughter that I want in my books.
Mm-hmm.
That is the laughter that I want for kids to have. And when I was just writing, one of the first people that I read was Christopher Paul Curtis, which is an amazing. He and I worked together on an award committee last year. It was so much fun because he's one of the first people that I met as a debut author. He was so warm, so welcoming, such a loving, kind, compassionate man. And when I read his work,
Mm-hmm.
I just loved the fact that he could speak about, some really hard topics, right? But he would bring joy into that. And for me, I felt like that's something I want to do. And I'm just really glad that I've been able to do that with, particularly, I think, with all my books to some degree, except maybe Island's End, because I think that's really serious. I don't think there's any laughter in it per se, although there are moments of joy. But I feel like with Time to Dance and with Climbing the Stairs, there were those moments of joy. And with The Bridge Home and Born Behind Bars, there are like laugh out loud
Mm-hmm.
moments. And that's important to me.
And I think that also, I would imagine for kids reading it, it's important for them to see that instead of just seeing
Right.
these characters having just this hard life, that they can relate to the kids more, you know.
Yeah, you bring up such an important point, right? And I should have said that earlier, and that's part of it as well. Because what happens, I think, is if you only see, it's not always, but there's a risk that if you only see the sadness, if you only see the hardship and the difficulty, that someone else will feel sympathy, which is okay, but that's not okay. You know what? What
Not as
I
good.
want, yeah, exactly. What I want, I never wanted pity as a kid. I never wanted sympathy as a kid, right?
Mm,
But empathy was okay.
mm.
Compassion was okay.
Oh, that's such a great distinction.
Yeah.
And um, a lot of the authors that I've interviewed have talked about the pressures that they felt, either from publishers or even just from themselves, to write more mainstream stories that they've been either told explicitly or they've kind of gotten the subtle message that there's not really an audience for the kinds of stories that they're writing. Did you ever feel, I mean, obviously with the success you've had, we know that that's not true, but did you ever feel that kind of pressure when you were, especially when you were first starting, or do you ever think, oh, you know, I really need to write something that's for more mainstream or more widely known?
So I will say I'm very lucky that I have, Nancy Paulson is my editor, and she's a marvelous person, right? So she publishes Jacqueline Woodson, and she has published Jacqueline Woodson for a long, long time, right? So she's somebody who's very aware of the situation, and she would never ask for anything mainstream. I think, in fact, she loves things that are not mainstream and has been trying to uplift voices. But I will say that in the beginning, my first novel, Climbing the Stairs, is the only book that was published before I became Nancy's author. And she was, she was still part of Penguin, obviously, but I wasn't her author per se. When we published Climbing the Stairs, there was a lot from my editor at the time, who was wonderful. I'm so grateful to him for publishing that book. But there were a lot of like, well, people won't understand this, they won't understand that. And it was my first novel. So we had a lot of, lots of conflict. And at that point, this was before We Need Diverse Books. So that means way before. That means those of us who were publishing in those days, we had to fight a lot of battles because, you would go, I remember one place where I went to a bookstore, we sold out of my books. And, they had got a substantial amount. And as I was leaving, I heard somebody say, they were like, oh, she sells so well, should we get in some more? And somebody said, no, 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 because multicultural books don't sell. And that's what they used to call them, right, in those days.
Right.
Multicultural books, like you have Multicultural Children's Book Day and so on. And that comes from that time. And like, so many of us have been working for this for a long time, that.
Right.
But I think some of the newer people don't maybe realize that. And obviously I am not, and our generation is not even the first, right? So there've been so many people who have been working for diversity in Kidlit for a very long time. And of all the blog posts that I've written, I think one of the most important was when I wrote about winning the Walter Award and what that meant to me personally. And if you Google We Need Diverse Books' blog, please read that, because that gives you a little bit of a glimpse of the history of diverse books in the field.
Yes, that's a great point to bring up, and also good for our audience to know too how, I mean, because with the We Need Diverse Books and Multicultural Children's Book Day, there's really been kind of a groundswell from readers saying that this is what they want, and so people should know that that's important. When you leave reviews, when you buy these books, when you get on social media and say how you want diverse books, it really does make a difference for the authors, that they get more positive feedback and more maybe better reception from editors. So that's
right.
Yes, we should go back and look.
Yes, the one quick thing I want to add is also, I think sometimes what happens is we get really excited about somebody, who's new and debut, and it's absolutely important. And I mean, I think I like to think that I have been one of those who raises, voices of people of color, especially, right? And people of all genders. That is very important to me, to raise up these voices, right? Religious diversity is also important to me. So all of those things I try to do. However, I think sometimes what happens is we get very excited about something that is new, and we forget to honor those people who have been working for a long time. And so I always say, do not forget. Do not forget those who have been doing this for a long time. Do not forget to honor them, to buy their books, to respect them, because some of them may not. I mean, I'm not online on all the new stuff. And there are some people who are not even a little bit online, but you need to educate yourself and honor them and respect them.
Oh, yes, that's a great point. And
because, sometimes I've even heard like people, oh, this is the first time I ever saw a South Indian person on the cover. And I think, goodness gracious me, that has been going on for a long time.
Right.
It's not just last year or not just the year before that, you know what?
Right. Yeah, and like you said, and to realize that even though we've made a lot of strides in recent years, we're building on the work that has been done in the past, and like you said, for such a long time. And boy, those were really the trailblazers who were going against the tide. So,
Right. And it's been going on for a very long time. So, that's something to remember. The other thing that I also think is just really important is to respect and also understand that that we shouldn't get too excited only about, I don't know, about lists or awards or anything. I mean, absolutely, those are important, right? Obviously, they're very important to me too. But all I'm saying is if you love a book,
mhm,
then love it and give it that devotion. Give it everything that you want to give it, right?
mhm,
So whether it receives outside recognition or not, if you love a book,
mhm.
then you give it that recognition. I think that's important. Like,
Yeah.
show that author, show that book that you love them.
Yes, and know that that's really important to the authors. Don't think that, because I know quite a few read all of the reviews that they get on Amazon or on any other. It really does make a difference to them. And let's see, I was just watching time. I want to be respectful of your time, so I'll try to um, just ask a few more questions. Really,
Absolutely. I'm here for you. And I think I don't know why I was there, but I think I have my fingers a bit thicker than I think now we're evolving to have these teeny tiny fingers that do all this stuff, but I'm a different generation. So I was like pressing it and nothing happened. And I think I maybe pressed it too often. And then anyways.
I've had to have my daughter do things for me before on the phone. So can you just touch this? I can't get this to go. Um, Speaking of young people, I would love to hear more about how you picked this age range to write for. You talked about how you love writing for young people because they really, those of us that are older, we don't have as much energy and maybe as enthusiasm. Maybe we're a little more jaded, but you've talked about how great it is to write for young people because they still have that energy and that idealism and really that capacity to change the world. So, what do you hope the young people in particular get out of your books? Because obviously, there are a lot of us that are adults that love reading your books too. But for young people, why do you write for them, and what do you hope they take away from it?
So I think for me, it's there are so many things. So when I started writing, there was also sometimes, right, people would condescend to young people, which I didn't like. And now you hear a lot of people say, I never saw myself in a book, and I see a lot of younger generation people also say this. And I think that has much more to do with book access than it has to do with the existence of these books, because these books have been around. Now, when I was growing up in the 70s in India, unfortunately, even though I was in India, the only kind of books that I ever saw that might have had, technically people like me were like mythology or something. I did not see realistic books like that. And so when I saw books like, let's say, The Secret Garden, which is supposedly a classic, I saw very racist representations of who
Yes,
I was. And
right.
so I think at that time, very early on, I felt like I had this commitment, this drive to create books for young people, because I wanted, from that early age, we need to have no violence. And sometimes it is violence, right? Racism is violence. It may be subtle violence. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. calls it spiritual violence, right? So when you do these things, like not show, not allow a Black child to see themselves in a book, or have really awful portrayals of what it is to be this or that or the other. I think for me, it's been like I just drop them in it, because I feel like, hey, you know what? When I was growing up, I had to be, I had to read books which had Latin in them or whoever, and we had so much of this English history stuff, right, just in the book. And so my tendency is to err in that direction.
Mm.
That said, there's it's a difficult balance, especially with like when you're writing middle grade.
Mm.
You so sometimes one different word, right? That it's understandable in context,
Mm-hmm.
and so that the reader sort of says, okay, I kind of get this. I get the emotion, or it's emotion rich, so that's there, and then the precise meaning may be lost on them, but that's okay because
But
someone
they
else
get
might get
that
it.
for the story, right?
Right, right. So for me, it's a question of putting everything in just like you would to a child who already knows the inner setting.
Mm-hmm.
Because come on, I mean, kids are dropped in science fiction. Nobody sits around explaining things, right? Kids are dropped in fantasy. That's not being explained. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's totally okay to put them in a different time or a different place. Um, on this earth, that's one of the things that a book can do. You can travel through story. It's like a time travel package. It's also a ticketless travel that's legal. But do it in such a way that there's enough emotion, there's enough story that the reader is not jerked out of the story.
Right. And so can you give us before we let you go, can you give us a preview on what you're working on now?
Yes, so I'm working on a whole bunch of different things now, but what I am really excited about is that I just sold my first picture book. So there's going
Wow.
to be, yeah, there's going to be more middle grade coming out, more YA coming out, I hope, right? I
Mhm.
sincerely hope, and also a novel for adults that I'm writing. But I am just really excited because as my most recent sale, it's called, tentative title, it's called Strong as a Lotus.
Mm.
And it was, I don't know when it's going to come out, but Nancy Paulson and I are going to talk about it soon.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, we have that to look forward to. And thank you so much for joining us and for
Thank
talking with us.
you.
Such a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so, so much. Yeah, it's a joy to see you all and reach out anytime if I can be of help. Thank you.
Thank
It
you
was an
very much,
honor.
everyone.